Reddit, what's your best/funniest personal example of petty revenge? For a while, I worked as a web designer in a small ad agency serving a very niche industry. Previously, the design team had no creative lead and were all sort of operating independently across varying clients. We decided to hire a creative director to fill that gap, and I was given the task of sorting through and giving first-round interviews to find the person who would later become my supervisor. Two candidates in particular stood out from the rest for very different reasons. One was exceptionally talented, an all-around nice guy, and somebody who generally would have been great for the role. The other, let's call him John, had mediocre talent, came across as an insufferable, arrogant prick, but had previous experience working within the niche industry that we serviced. He also had contacts within that industry that could lead to new business. Despite my strong recommendation to not hire John, his relationships in the industry were too compelling to our agency's leadership to pass up, and they hired him. It didn't take long before the entire company started to realize John was a huge burden. He had virtually zero experience in anything related to digital design. Design for apps, websites, mobile, etc. were all completely and utterly beyond his grasp, but he used his position of relative power to make decisions on those projects that the entire design team refused to support, most of which came back to bite the company in the ass later. The design team hated him because fixing and working around his screw-ups became part of our daily routine. The sales team hated him because he'd claim it took him unbelievably exaggerated amounts of time to complete even the most trivial of tasks, for days to design a business card template, so they wouldn't even assign him projects anymore. Work that was clearly his responsibility started to rapidly trickle down to the rest of the design team. We'd be working late nights 4 out of 5 days a week because all of his projects that were in danger of missing deadlines would be reassigned to us. Meanwhile, he'd be the first to walk out the door every day, right at 5 p.m. without fail. On top of all that, the guy was absolutely, without a doubt, the biggest tool I've ever met. Always right about everything, completely unbending on his idiotic opinions, and completely clueless that literally every person in the building wished he would get hit by a truck. I genuinely tried to work with him for about a year, until I decided that the job had become intolerable because of him and wasn't going to change any time soon, so I turned in my 2-week notice. About a month after I left, I heard that he had been let go from the job. Shortly after that, I noticed that he had changed his LinkedIn status to show that he was working for a new agency I had never heard of, also servicing that same niche industry. I looked them up and quickly figured out that he had started his own agency, a primarily digital agency, when he had no experience in digital or interactive design, and had literally fucked up every digital/interactive project he'd ever been on, I know, because most of them were reassigned to me when he proved incapable of doing them himself. I looked at the portfolio on his website and found literally project after project of my work. He was using my work from the ad agency as examples of the work his agency could produce. I briefly considered contacting him and requesting he remove my work from his portfolio for ethical reasons. But I could already hear his reply in my head. As creative lead, all work done by my team is an extension of my creative direction. He'd used similar lines in the past to insert himself into receiving credit on successful projects he'd had zero involvement on. So instead I sent an email to one of the partners of the agency we both had worked for, saying something along the lines of, "Hey, not sure if you've noticed this, but it looks like John is using your company's intellectual property to directly compete against you. If I had to guess, I'd assume his next step would be to make a move at your client list." The reply was short and sweet. "Thanks for bringing this to my attention. He'll be hearing from our attorney in the morning." John's website was brought down less than 24 hours later.
My mom had a fantastic one. She was a language teacher at my high school, and years after I had graduated, she called me kind of upset because a group of guys was trying to make her look dumb. The class was supposed to write one of those team dialogues in Spanish and had a week or so to prepare it, then had to perform it in front of the class. When she called for them to do theirs, they said, "But we already did ours. We're not doing it again." She said, "You definitely didn't do it. I don't have any record of it here, and I would remember it if you had." They refused to do it, insisting they already performed it and that it was her fault she didn't take notes/scores down. She was feeling puzzled and questioning herself when one of the good kids came and said, "They didn't do it. They were bragging about making you look stupid and threatened the whole class if they told you anything. But please don't tell them I told you this. I don't want any problems with them." These were those stereotypical dumb jock types who everyone was scared of for whatever reason. My mom was really into yoga at the time and got a great idea while meditating. She went in the next day and said, "Boys,
I owe you an apology.
I found my notes on your presentation and I do remember it. I don't know how I forgot. She went on to describe all the grammatical mistakes they made, that their dialogue hadn't been as long as required, that they didn't include the necessary vocabulary, etc. All made up. She failed them all on the project and they couldn't do a thing about it without admitting they'd made it all up. TLDR, my mom is awesome.
Had a chief warrant officer in Iraq throw a bottle of petroleum jelly at my after I got done ranting about something I've long since forgotten. Told me to go, take care of it, and come back when I feel better. During his afternoon siesta I spent an hour covering everything on his desk with it in the most inconspicuous spots, e.g. inside the handle of a coffee mug, underneath the handle of the Keurig pod loader, behind the canister holding Keurig coffee pods, anywhere he could grab something and not see it without first inspecting it. He came back and proceeded to curse at a rate never witnessed before as he had to continuously wipe all the jelly off his hands every 3 minutes. He caught the jelly on the inside rims of his over-the-ear headphones before he rimmed his ears with it, but the best came after I let him calm down and get back to work. Everyone else in the office watched me do it, no one said a thing, but they all had their eyes on me as I waited 5 minutes before picking up my phone on my desk and slowly dialed the number at his desk. It rings, everyone turns to look at him, he's on the computer, picks up the phone, slaps it to his ear, Radio Battalion SIMOSONOFABITCH. Turns his head, ear was caked full of petroleum jelly I had dumped all over the earpiece of the phone. Master Guns and Major told me these antics and pranks made that deployment. C.W. O'Ryan, if you're reading this, sorry, not sorry.
I was casually walking my pup in the same area I usually do. It's a nice trail surrounding a wetlands reserve and there's generally a lot of dog walkers and people riding bikes. The schools around here just let out for the day and there was a group of 3 boys riding their bikes coming from behind me. I could hear their muffled talking and giggling and all of a sudden they were a few feet behind me and one of them yelled, "Hey! Catch!" and threw some crumbled paper at me. I couldn't care less about the paper but the yelling scared my little pup so I was naturally angry but being awkward I didn't say anything. What am I going to do? Beat up some kids? I did have my pup's steamy tater tots in a bag and as they rode off I lightly tossed it. By God it lands in one of the kids' hoodies. And he didn't notice. They were too busy cackling away at how they got aim. I saw them riding ahead and it took maybe 100 yards before he noticed there were some little round brown dumplings in his hood. He screamed and threw the bag onto the ground while the other 2 died laughing. They looked back at me but I was so far behind them that they just rode onward. I also couldn't help myself and laughed as I picked up the poo and threw it out a few minutes later. You know, got to be a good citizen and all that.
I have 2 with a previous landlord/property management company. I signed a lease on a townhouse while in college that included high-speed internet. The setup was basically one shitty router for 14x townhouses, so like 28 people. Needless to say it was shit, and the location of our unit versus the router made it worse. We made some calls to try and get them to add a router or hardwire us in so we could add our own. No dice. Eventually, I paid to get my own service and added 2x routers in our unit. I changed the SSID to match what the free router was and kept the passwords the same, so to the residents it looked like there was better coverage. After about 2 weeks, I changed one router's password and just disconnected the other. So some residents could use the free router, some had a bad password, and some could connect but couldn't reach the outside world. They must have been flooded with calls because within 24 hours they had someone out and added 3x new routers to help with coverage. The other was after a huge snowfall, 24-inch in 24 hours. The property management company hadn't touched the snow in our parking lot for days. After day 3, I called to mention we were sort of trapped and they needed to send trucks/snow blowers/etc. to take care of things. The response I got was basically, "Sorry, we'll get to it sooner or later." Side note, years ago if you opened a Yahoo email, you could add a second email for recovery without confirming it. I created a new @Yahoo email address and used their general@property management as the alternate email. I had to copy every email to both. I then signed up for alerts for every time there was an eBay listing for snow plow, snow blower, snow shovel, or there was a sale on X snow removal gear. It took a matter of hours before thousands of emails were sent. Ended up crashing their email server. They responded to all residents with a very nice email explaining they get the frustration and they're working on it. So I paused the alerts. 24 hours later, still nothing, alerts back on. Another email, another pause, another day of nothing, repeat. Eventually we got the driveway plowed, and life was good. Edit. Thanks for the gold. I have some more stories with the same management property I'll update with when I get to a PC. More stories. Edit. Property 1. My third year of school, myself and 5 other guys rented a 6-bedroom house from this awesome couple. Lady was the DA in town, husband managed the houses they had, super cool, very responsive, and just great landlords. Year 4 we stay at the house, all 6 of us, but cool owners sub the management duties out to XYZ Property Management, who control like 95% of the rentals in this town. No major changes other than everything now takes forever to get taken care of, but whatever, we deal with it. Move-out time comes and we get a call from XYZ saying they don't have a damage report for the house, so every piece of damage they find will be charged to us. We're all pissed since the house had its share of damage prior to our move-in. I called the owner, DA lady, and asked how damages are fixed if it is outside of the security deposit amount for us, and fill her in on what they're doing. She said that in the management agreement they are responsible for all damage as of the date they've taken over, unless it requires an insurance claim. She advised me to go ahead and stick them with the bill since she knew we filled out a damage sheet on move-in, and we kept it in good shape. I found the original damage slip from 2 years prior, updated it accordingly with any new items copied, crumpled up a bit, a coffee stain, or 2 for aging. And upon walkthrough, when they mentioned we would be stuck with all repairs, I presented a copy of the damage report from Outmove in 2 years prior. They then asked to have that copy, and they would send us a new copy when they got back to the office, which we declined. Then they said they couldn't honor it because it wasn't their letterhead and from a prior owner, who still owned it. We called the DA, and she took our side, citing that they should have taken care of them when they took over, and she might have to rethink her contract with them. 100% security refund for all of us. Year 5 townhouse, 5-year plan, had our lease start on July 1st, but both my roomie and I had internships and couldn't get there until around Labor Day. I drove to the apartment to drop off a load of my stuff for the year and pick up the keys. I sign for the keys and go on my way. Within 10 seconds of walking into the apartment, an overwhelming stink rapes my nose. Someone had closed up the fridge, then unplugged it. The mold was out of control. I call them and explain what's going on, and they tell me that is my problem since I didn't report it within 48 hours of July 1st, lease start date. I kindly reminded them I picked up the keys 15 minutes ago and had not been there, no luck from them. 15 minutes on Google lead me to the State Health Department, which my mother works for, requirements for APTs. There is a blurb that said something along the lines of if mold is found in X unit, all adjoining units must be tested and be giving full remediation. I called one more time and said I need a new fridge or could clean it myself, but would be withholding the portion of rent for my time and cleaning materials. They denied me. I copied all the managers at XYZ Property Management and my mother/her boss who had healthdepartment.gov email addresses. Basics of the email was what I found, photos, and a snapshot of the state statute I mentioned. Within 60 seconds of the email going out, I had a call from XYZ, an angry call. We ended up not having to pay rent for the July, August, September, and October. Final thing was XYZ always used our apartment for their showings since we had a pretty bomb-ass multi-TV and projector setup in the basement. The problem was they wouldn't give the required 24-hour heads up. They would knock with a group of people and say, sorry guys, but unit ## was supposed to let us in, but whatever excuse. Can we quick see yours so they don't have to reschedule? We always said yes because I felt bad that these other kids would get jammed up. We asked a few times that they start calling ahead, like they legally have to, but it fell on deaf ears. Eventually we found out one of the managers who did a lot of showings had an embarrassing legal history. I used the plotter on campus to print out some of these charges, all public knowledge, and some really unflattering photos that went with each from his Facebook. We hung them all over the apartment and waited. 2 days later, random showing. The look on his face was priceless. That was the last showing he gave there. Others in the office still came by though.
I'm a real estate attorney in Texas and have handled hundreds of evictions on the landlord side, but less than 5 on the tenant side. Had a trial today defending a tenant from a very wrongful eviction. The landlord was so in the wrong that it wasn't even funny, but they refused to listen to reason and were dead set on eviction. Well, the judge today was less than amused about their conduct, denied the eviction, and awarded me a nice chunk of attorney fees. I take the property manager out to the hallway to discuss the underlying issues, and she literally flips out on me, accusing me of bullying her and trying to outlawyer me, conveniently forgetting that I'm an expert in the field and she's a moron, and further forgetting she just tried to bully my clients. I have a number of causes of action to file against them. I told her what I would be filing if they didn't settle. And she said, do what you want. You're not getting a damn penny off us. I tried to explain that their fees in defending my suit, which is essentially a slam dunk, will far exceed what I want in settlement. But they appear ready to sink in their heels and fight. I can already smell the new car they're going to end buying me if I push this thing to trial.
This happened to my so when he was at university. Another comment here reminded me of it. His class were doing presentations in pairs, and he got paired with some girl who didn't bother to bring notes or research information for their presentation. She instead let him do all the work, and any slides she did were made from his notes and research. He complained to his tutor, and she told him, "Don't worry, leave it to me." And then the day of the presentation comes. They present, and then at the end, the tutor asks the girl a question. If I remember correctly, the question was something like, is there any evidence to suggest that some cultures are more prone to mental health problems? And the girl answered no. The tutor then asked my so the exact same question, and because he'd actually read the research on the topic, he was able to list of several studies that showed that some cultures are in fact more prone to mental health issues. The girl glared at him the entire time he answered the tutor's question. Pretty sure she ended up with a D, while he got an A or B. Edit. Change whilst to while as requested.
I used to buy small treat bags of gourmet cookies from a local bakery a few years ago. I would eat maybe one a day, but they were a treat for me. Back then my husband and I had a retail store and a few friends that would hang out at the store. It was kind of a lounge too. Well, my husband and our friends, most were guys, would just help themselves, but they had no self-control, nor would they even ask for some. I would buy the bag of cookies for me, and they'd be gone. I would try to hide them but couldn't. So I bagged up a bunch of dog treats that the local pet food store had that looked very, very close to cookies for people, and were all about the same size as the ones I bought from the bakery. I placed them where all the guys could see them, and waited. Yep, they tried them, asked if they were a bad batch or maybe the bakery missed an ingredient or two in the dough. I waited till they tried to eat more than 3 each, then told them they were dog treat. They never touched my cookies again,